The October wind cut through my black dress like glass, and the sound of shovels hitting soil echoed through the silence of St. Augustine's Cemetery. My father's casket had just begun its slow descent when my stepmother Vivian stepped forward in her designer heels, the sharp click of each step slicing through the funeral's fragile stillness. I could feel every pair of eyes turn toward her, the widow who hadn't shed a single tear in 3 days, who had spent the wake whispering about estate logistics while I tried to breathe through grief. Before we let Sterling rest, she said, her voice rich with fake sorrow, "There's something everyone needs to know." My heart stopped. Aunt Margaret's hand tightened on my arm. "Vivian, not now," she whispered. But Vivian smiled a cold, deliberate curve of her lips that sent a chill crawling up my spine. "Now is perfect," she said, turning to the crowd of 40-something mourners. "It's time for the truth about Clara." The way she said my name made it sound like a curse. This woman, she continued, pointing at me like an attorney cornering a criminal, has been living a lie for 30 years. She's not Sterling's real daughter. For a second, even the crows went silent. The pastor froze mid-prayer. My father's brother dropped his hymn book. I could hear someone gasp behind me. Then a wave of murmurs rippled through the rows. "What is that? True? My God!" My knees buckled. I clutched the edge of the folding chair to keep from collapsing. "You're lying," I managed, but my voice sounded small foreign. "Am I?" Vivian's manicured fingers produced a folder from beneath her coat. "Sterling's blood type was O negative," she said, holding up a hospital record like it was a weapon. "Clara's is AB positive. It's genetically impossible for him to be her father." She turned to face the crowd, letting the words hang heavy in the cold air. "I have the medical proof right here." My vision tunneled. I could barely see her through the fog of shock. Behind her, her son Ethan stood with a smug grin adjusting the cufflinks my father had given him last Christmas. "Sorry, sis," he said, his voice low, but cruel enough for everyone to hear. "Guess you're not family after all?" I felt the air leave my lungs. My father's casket was still halfway down. The man who taught me how to ride a bike, who stayed up nights helping me apply to grad school, who left me voicemails every Sunday, was being buried while his wife erased me from his life. "You're vile," Aunt Margaret hissed, stepping forward. At his funeral, Vivian. "Have you lost all shame?" Vivian only tilted her head. "I'm just telling the truth." Sterling would have wanted honesty. Her voice was syrupy, calculated. He hid this because he pitied her. But family deserves the truth. Real blood deserves his legacy. That word legacy hit like a knife, because this wasn't about truth. It was about money. The stores, the house, the trust fund. My father's empire now dangling like bait for vultures. "You will stop this right now," Aunt Margaret said. "Enough." "Oh, but I'm just getting started," Vivian replied, eyes glittering. "Sterling's lawyer will confirm it all. He knows what's in the medical records. Isn't that right? Mr. Price?" Heads turned. Standing a few yards away under the oak tree was Alden Price, my father's longtime attorney and friend. He held a weathered briefcase close to his chest, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Price," Vivian said, pressing her advantage, "tell them the truth. You have the files." The crowd's eyes shifted toward him like a slow tide. Alden didn't move for a long moment. Then, with a calmness that made my skin prickle, he stepped forward. "Mrs. Hayes," he said quietly, "perhaps it's time I read what Sterling left for this exact scenario." The color drained from Vivian's face. "What are you talking about?" she snapped. "There's no—" "There is," Alden interrupted, his tone steady, deliberate. "Your husband anticipated this." A murmur swept through the mourners. My pulse hammered in my ears. Vivian blinked rapidly, suddenly, unsure. "That's ridiculous," she said, but her voice trembled. Alden stopped beside me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Sterling asked me to deliver his words if anyone ever questioned his daughter's place in this family." My throat closed around a sob I refused to let out. Even in death, my father had known. He had prepared. He had seen through her. Vivian's confidence faltered, the mask cracking just enough to reveal the fury underneath. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "Oh, I'm very serious," Alden replied. Then he opened the briefcase, revealing a sealed envelope marked in my father's handwriting, to be opened only if the truth is twisted. The words shimmered under the pale October light, and the last thing I saw before my vision blurred with tears was Vivian taking a single step back like someone who'd just realized the stage she built beneath her feet was about to collapse. The cemetery went silent except for the wind scraping through the dry maple leaves. Vivian's face, always so composed, paled beneath her immaculate makeup. For a woman who had orchestrated every detail of my father's funeral down to the hymn selections, she suddenly looked small-cornered. Alden held the envelope with reverence, the way one might hold a verdict. 6 months before his death, he said, "Your husband came to my office with this sealed letter notarized and witnessed. His exact instructions were, if Vivian Hayes or anyone under her influence ever questions my daughter's legitimacy, you will read this aloud publicly." Murmurs swelled around us. Vivian shook her head, her diamond earrings trembling. "This is absurd. Sterling was grieving. He was confused." He was neither confused nor grieving," Alden said sharply, cutting her off. "He was meticulous, methodical, and he anticipated every move you might make." The pastor stepped back, uncertain whether to intervene or bear witness. Even the workers with the casket ropes froze mid-motion. Alden broke the seal with steady hands. The sound of tearing paper echoed across the graves. I could barely breathe. The letter unfolded in slow motion, my father's familiar handwriting visible from where I stood. Alden adjusted his glasses and began to read. "To my daughter, Clara Hayes," he said, his voice carrying over the gravesite, "and to all present, should this ever be necessary. If you are hearing these words, then my fears have come true. Vivian has tried to erase what love made real." My breath caught. Vivian opened her mouth to protest, but Alden kept reading. "Clara is my daughter in every way that matters by law, by love, by blood. I have documentation to support this, but first, let me speak to the heart of it. When her mother Angela died, I promised to raise Clara with every ounce of strength I had. For 15 years, I did exactly that. And though Vivian married me later, she never accepted what she could not control." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Aunt Margaret let out a small sob. Alden turned the page. "Vivian, you once told me that love without blood was meaningless. I told you then, and I tell you now, that blood without love is empty." Vivian's jaw tightened, fury rising behind her trembling facade. "Enough," she snapped, stepping forward. "This is theatrical." Alden raised a hand. "You wanted truth," he said, eyes narrowing. "Let's finish it." He continued, "If this moment arrives, know that I left copies of every medical record, every paternity test, every notarized statement confirming Clara's birth, and my legal acknowledgement of her. You may claim science, but you forget science can also prove your lies." Vivian froze. The tremor in her hands became visible. Alden reached into his briefcase again and pulled out a small black recorder. "Your husband thought of everything he said." He even left his own voice. The world seemed to tilt. Vivian's lips parted as if to object, but Alden pressed play. My father's voice, steady, warm, unmistakable, filled the cemetery. "If you're hearing this," he said, "it means Vivian has done what she always threatened. Turn my funeral into a spectacle to strip Clara of her name. Vivian, I warned you that cruelty has a cost. I told you 100 times you cannot destroy what love built." My vision blurred. I heard gasps, whispers, the shuffling of feet. "Let me be clear," Dad's recorded voice continued. "Vivian, you forged hospital records 2 years ago. You had access to my files when you pretended to handle my insurance renewals. You switched blood-type documents to create the illusion of doubt. I knew, and I gathered proof." The crowd erupted in disbelief. Vivian stumbled backward, color draining completely from her face. "That's a lie," she shouted. "He's manipulating from the grave." "You manipulated him while he was alive," Alden said coldly. "And he knew." Dad's voice kept going calm and devastating. "I conducted my own DNA test with the hospital lab filed under a pseudonym. I also filed a notarized affidavit confirming Clara as my biological child. The results are 99.998% conclusive. Copies are held by Alden Price and 2 other attorneys. Vivian's voice cracked. No, that can't be. It can, Alden replied, producing a folder from the briefcase. And it is. He held up a certified DNA test with a seal visible even from 10 feet away. Sterling Hayes and Clara Hayes, 99.98% probability of paternity, dated April 14, 2017. Witnessed and notarized. The crowd's whispers turned into a low roar. Someone clapped a hand over their mouth. Aunt Margaret whispered, "He really did think of everything. Dad's recorded message wasn't done." "Vivian," he said, his tone turning colder, "you may try to claim what isn't yours, but I have left specific instructions in my will. The stores, the properties, and my accounts go entirely to Clara. You will receive what was agreed in our prenuptial contract. You thought you destroyed it. You didn't. Alden has the original. If you attempt to contest this, the recording you made with your lover, yes, the one you tried to delete, will be made public." A gasp exploded from the crowd. Vivian's composure shattered. She took a step back, shaking her head violently. "This is slander." Sterling was delusional. "Enough," Alden said, pressing stop on the recorder. "The evidence stands." From the edge of the crowd, a uniformed officer stepped forward. "I hadn't noticed him before Detective Rowe, my father's friend from the Rotary Club." "We've heard enough," he said. "We have warrants for Ms. Hayes's pending investigation on forgery and tampering with medical documents." Gasps turned into stunned silence. 2 officers moved toward Vivian. "You can't arrest me here," she screamed, voice-cracking mascara running down her face. "This is a funeral, so was your husband's death," Alden said quietly, "and you turned it into a stage." Vivian lunged toward me, then wild her grief and fury twisted into something almost feral. "You think you've won, you little liar!" she shrieked. "He pitied you. He never—" Her words were cut off by the officers restraining her. I stepped back, heart hammering, breath sharp in the cold air. For the first time, I looked her in the eyes and saw something new. Fear. Pure, bone-deep fear. The kind that comes when a mask finally breaks. As they led her away, the only sound left was the wind and the quiet mechanical whir of the casket lowering again, this time uninterrupted. My father was finally being laid to rest, and this time the truth was buried with dignity, not deceit. The moment the police car door slammed shut on Vivian, a strange stillness fell over the cemetery. The same woman who had strutted through life in diamonds and deception now sat behind the glass, her face pressed to the window, screaming words no one could hear. For a long time, none of us moved. The air itself felt heavy, charged with disbelief and a kind of relief I couldn't name. Then Aunt Margaret wrapped her arm around my shoulders, her voice trembling. "Your father would be so proud of you, Clara. He protected you even after death." I nodded, unable to speak. My eyes went to the casket, finally resting at the bottom of the grave. For the first time in 3 days, I let the tears come, not out of weakness, but release. The man who'd loved me more fiercely than anyone had prepared every safeguard, every truth, every line of defense. And the woman who'd tried to rewrite that truth was now in handcuffs. Ethan stood a few feet away, frozen, his expression unreadable. The same young man who'd mocked me minutes earlier now looked like a child watching his world collapse. "Ethan," I said softly, my voice barely above the rustle of leaves, "you should go home." He blinked as if waking from a dream. "I didn't know," he muttered, staring down at his shoes. "She said it was all true, that you'd stolen from us." "She lied to you," Alden said firmly, stepping beside me. "Your mother's been forging documents and laundering money through your father's accounts for years. Sterling knew. He just didn't want to destroy you along with her." Ethan's face went white. "What?" "The investigation's been open for months," Alden continued. "Your father was gathering evidence with the district attorney. He even delayed updating his will to ensure everything was airtight." Ethan swayed slightly, running a hand through his hair. I didn't know." For a moment, pity flickered in my chest. He was my father's stepson, not his blood, but Dad had loved him anyway. "You should cooperate," Alden said gently. It's the only way to distance yourself from what she's done. Ethan nodded numbly, his voice cracking. She said he'd already cut me out, that I'd have nothing. Alden met his eyes. You still have a chance to do the right thing. Your father wanted that for you. The wind carried the faint hum of a passing car. Somewhere, the church bells chimed noon. The pastor, regaining his composure, quietly signaled the burial workers to continue. The casket disappeared under the last layer of soil, the sound of it final but not cruel. It was closure. When the mourners finally began to disperse, several came to me, old employees from Dad's hardware stores, longtime customers, even strangers who'd once borrowed his tools and never forgot his kindness. He helped me fix my roof after the storm, one man said, eyes glistening. Didn't charge me a dime. He gave my son his first job, another added. Said every kid deserves a chance to build something. Their words poured over me like a balm, softening the ache in my chest. Dad's legacy wasn't money or property. It was decency. It was loyalty. It was the courage to love even when betrayed. By the time I left the cemetery, the sun had dipped behind the clouds, leaving everything painted in gray light. The police cars were gone. Vivian was gone. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the outsider in my own family. That night, I sat at Dad's desk in his office, the same oak desk where he'd signed every business deal, every check, every school permission slip. The smell of sawdust still lingered in the air, mixed with oil and faint traces of his aftershave. On the surface lay the sealed copies Alden had given me, the DNA test, the will, and a final letter marked simply, for Clara. My hands shook as I opened it. My dearest Brookie. No, he'd crossed it out and rewritten my Clara. If you're reading this, the truth is out. I wanted to tell you sooner, but I also wanted to protect you from the ugliness I knew was coming. Vivian was never content with love. She needed control. When she couldn't control me, she turned to destroying what I loved most, you. I let her believe I was blind because it gave me time to build the safeguards you're seeing now. You are my daughter. Legally, biologically, spiritually. And more than that, you are my legacy. Don't let this pain harden you. You come from a long line of builders, Clara. Build something new from the ruins. My tears dropped onto the page, smudging the ink. I could almost hear his voice the way he used to say, "Every wound teaches you how to fix something." A knock interrupted my thoughts. Alden stood at the doorway, hat in hand. You holding up? Barely, I admitted. He stepped in and placed another envelope on the desk. The DA will want your statement tomorrow. But before that, you should know, Sterling filed a restraining order against Vivian 2 weeks before his heart attack. I frowned. You mean... He knew she'd try something even then. He suspected she might push it further, Alden said grimly. The toxicology report from the hospital came back today. There were traces of digitalis in his bloodstream heart medication he wasn't prescribed. My stomach dropped. You think she... I don't think, Alden said. I know. The DA's office has already reopened the case. If the autopsy confirms poisoning, she's looking at homicide charges. For a moment, the room tilted. I gripped the desk to steady myself. She killed him, I whispered. Alden's eyes softened. He suspected she might try. That's why he moved his accounts, his business, and his legal power of attorney to you weeks before it happened. I stared down at the open letter, my father's handwriting glowing faintly under the desk lamp. Build something new. I took a deep breath. Then, that's what I'll do. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, one by one. The night no longer felt heavy, it felt alive with purpose. The truth was finally mine to carry, and I intended to honor it. The next morning, I drove to the courthouse with Alden sitting quietly beside me, his briefcase balanced on his knees. The same briefcase that had shattered Vivian's entire performance now held the documents that would end her freedom. My hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel, not from fear, but from something sharper. Righteous anger finally given shape. The courthouse steps loomed ahead, gray stone under a steel sky. News had already spread about the arrest at the funeral. Reporters waited outside, cameras ready. Ms. Hayes, one called out. Did your stepmother really forge your father's records? I kept walking. Another shouted. Is it true she poisoned him? Alden placed a hand at my elbow, steady but firm. No statements yet, he murmured. Let the evidence speak. Inside the DA's office smelled like paper ink and cold coffee. The lead prosecutor, a woman named Harper Dean, shook my hand with quiet empathy. Your father was a good man, she said. We intend to make sure his killer faces every consequence. Her words hit like a stone, dropped into water, rippling outward, unstoppable. She laid out the evidence on the conference table: Vivian's forged medical charts, falsified life insurance forms, altered prescriptions, and the phone records that tied her to a supplier in Reno. Alden added the recordings Sterling had left, including one final backup file Vivian didn't know existed. In it, my father described her behavior in the weeks before his death, how she'd grown agitated when he refused to sign new documents, how she'd threatened to make sure the empire doesn't end up in the wrong hands. By noon, the DA had what she needed to charge Vivian with first-degree murder, forgery, and fraud. It felt surreal watching her name appear on the official paperwork. For years, she dictated every rule in our home: what I could say, where I could go, how I should grieve. Now her name was a case number, her lies turned into evidence. When we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed again. Clara, how does it feel to know your stepmother could face life in prison? I stopped on the marble steps, met their cameras head on, and said, the only words that felt true: justice isn't revenge, it's peace. That night, I walked through Dad's flagship store, Hayes Hardware, the one he'd built from nothing but savings and stubborn hope. The air smelled of sawdust and metal. Every aisle was a memory. I could see him teaching me how to measure planks, laughing when I got paint on my shoes, humming the same old Johnny Cash tune under his breath. The staff looked up as I passed, their faces full of something between respect and quiet pride. Welcome back, Miss Hayes, one said softly. It's good to see you home. I took over the business the following week. The accounts transferred smoothly. Alden had already handled most of the paperwork before Dad's death. Ethan came by on the third day. He looked thinner, his eyes hollowed by sleeplessness. I gave my statement, he said. I told them everything I knew, every email, every document Mom touched. He swallowed hard. I can't undo what she did, but I want to help rebuild. For a moment, I saw the frightened boy my father had once tried to reach. You can start by earning trust, I said gently. Come to work. Learn the business like Dad taught us both. His eyes brightened a little. You'd really let me? He loved you too, I said quietly. That's reason enough. Weeks passed. Vivian's trial date was set. The district attorney's team uncovered proof she'd altered Dad's heart medication dosage the night before his death, slipping digitalis into his pills to induce cardiac arrest. The forensic toxicologist testified that without Sterling's prior medical condition, the dose would have been instantly lethal. In the courtroom, Vivian sat rigid, her perfect composure gone. She refused to look at me, even as Alden read from Dad's final recording, his voice echoing through the chamber, calm and steady, a ghost reclaiming his truth. If she harms me, he'd said, I leave behind not vengeance, but evidence. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. When the judge pronounced the sentence life imprisonment with no parole for 15 years, I felt something release inside me, a weight that had sat between my ribs for months. The gavel struck. Vivian's eyes flicked up just once, and in that split second, I didn't see hatred. I saw recognition. The kind of quiet realization that comes when the mask finally falls and all that's left is truth. Outside, the sky was bright, almost too bright. Reporters crowded the steps again, but this time I didn't hide. Ms. Hayes, one woman asked, what would your father say if he could see you now? I paused, looking toward the courthouse columns glinting in the sunlight. He'd tell me to get back to work, I said, smiling faintly, and to keep the lights on. Alden laughed softly beside me. He really would. Life moved forward. The story made national news for a week. Widow convicted in family estate murder. Strangers sent letters to the store telling me how my father's words about love over blood had changed them. A woman from Kansas wrote that she played the funeral recording for her son to teach him what integrity sounded like. Another from Maine said she'd left an abusive marriage after hearing the story. The internet called me the daughter who fought back. I didn't care about the headlines. What mattered was that Dad's voice, steady, kind, unbreakable, had outlasted her lies. Ethan became the store manager 6 months later. He worked hard, never late, never lazy. The employees warmed to him eventually. Some evenings we'd close early and sit on the loading dock watching the sun fade over the town. "He'd be proud of you," Ethan said one night. "Of us, I think." I smiled, remembering Dad's words. "Build something new from the ruins." "We are," I said. Every day. Before leaving that night, I turned off the store lights one by one. In the darkness, the faint scent of sawdust lingered steady, familiar, eternal. It wasn't grief anymore. It was gratitude. Justice had been served not by vengeance, but by truth itself. And that truth, my father's legacy, was now mine to protect. A year later, on a warm September morning, I stood in the same courtroom where Vivian had been sentenced. The pews were empty now except for Alden Ethan and a few city officials. This time, I wasn't here for justice, I was here for purpose. The Sterling Hayes Foundation for Victims of Domestic and Financial Abuse was officially opening its first grant program. The plaque glinted in the morning sun, the engraved words catching the light like a quiet promise. Truth outlasts lies, love outlasts blood. As I stepped to the podium, memories flooded in the funeral, the betrayal, the trembling in my hands when Alden opened that envelope. I could still hear my father's voice in my head. "You can rebuild. Even from ashes." I looked over at Ethan, who sat beside Alden, dressed neatly in a navy suit. His posture was steady, his eyes clear. He gave me a small nod, the kind that carried more apology and redemption than words ever could. I began speaking, my voice strong but soft. My father believed that integrity was the only inheritance worth leaving behind. He built his business on trust, his life on love, and his legacy on truth. A year ago, I stood here broken, but today I stand here whole because his lessons didn't die with him. They grew. My words carried across the room, weaving through the quiet space like thread through fabric. The Sterling Hayes Foundation will help those who've been silenced, manipulated, and controlled people like I once was. It will fund legal aid, emergency housing, and therapy for survivors of financial and emotional abuse. My father taught me that broken doesn't mean beyond repair. It just means you need the right tools. There was light applause from the small audience. Alden's eyes glistened behind his glasses. He had been more than a lawyer these past 12 months. He had been a guide through the aftermath, the endless paperwork, the estate transfers, the emotional fallout. When the ceremony ended, he approached me, clasping my hand. "Sterling would be proud, Clara," he said. "He always said you had his steadiness." "I had his stubbornness," I replied with a small laugh. "That too," he smiled. Afterward, Ethan and I walked to the old hardware store, now bustling again. The shelves gleamed, the windows spotless, the sign freshly repainted. The community had rallied around us. Business had never been better, not because of publicity, but because people trusted the name again. "Dad would have loved this," Ethan murmured, running a hand over the counter where Sterling used to keep his ledger. He'd say, "The nails are straight, the customers are smiling, job well done." I smiled. He'd say, "Now quit talking and sweep the floor." We both laughed, a sound that finally felt free of pain. In the back office, a small framed photograph sat on the wall, Dad, Mom, and me taken at my college graduation. Beneath it, I'd added another frame, Dad and Ethan working together at the store, one of the few pictures Vivian hadn't destroyed. It wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about healing what came after. That evening, I drove to the cemetery alone. The sky was streaked with orange and gold, the same colors from the day of his burial, only gentler now. I laid a bouquet of yellow roses, his favorite, on the grave. "It's done, Dad," I whispered. "She's gone for good. The stores are thriving. Ethan's changing. And your name, your legacy, it's clean again." I knelt, brushing the dust from the marble. The inscription still read, "Sterling Hayes' father, builder, believer in love." The wind picked up softly, carrying the smell of rain and earth. Somewhere behind me, the church bells rang 6 times. I closed my eyes and imagined his voice, the warmth, the gravel, the way he always said my name like it meant something sacred. For the first time, I didn't cry. I smiled. When I returned home, I found an envelope on my porch. No return address, just my name in a handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a single letter unsigned. "I don't expect forgiveness," it read, But I hope you know that your father loved you until his last breath. I saw it. I saw the way he looked at you, how he spoke about you. I was jealous, angry, cruel. I'm paying for that now every day. I hope the world is kinder to you than I was. V. I sat on the porch for a long time, the letter trembling in my hand. Vivian's prison didn't have walls of stone anymore. It was regret. I didn't respond. Some truths didn't need conversation. They just needed peace. I folded the paper neatly and placed it in Dad's old toolbox beside his hammer and measuring tape. A part of me hoped she'd find some measure of redemption, though I knew it wasn't mine to give. Months passed quietly. The foundation grew. We opened 2 more branches, one in Reno, one in Austin. Survivors began sending letters, stories of freedom and rebuilding. Each one reminded me why I'd kept fighting, not for revenge, but for restoration. Ethan thrived at the store. He met someone, a kind woman named Lila, who worked with the foundation. One evening over dinner, he announced they were expecting a baby. "We want to name him Sterling," he said softly. My chest tightened. "That's perfect," I said. The night they brought the baby home, I held him in my arms, a tiny, wrinkled, perfect miracle. His eyes fluttered open gray like my father's. "Welcome home, little one," I whispered. "You've got big shoes to fill." Ethan smiled. "He'll have good teachers." Sometimes I think about how full circle life can be. A year ago, I buried my father. Today, I was holding his namesake. The past no longer haunted me. It guided me. Every scar, every betrayal, every painful truth had become part of something bigger, a blueprint for healing. Before I left that night, I whispered a promise to the sleeping baby. "You'll never have to fight for love," I said. "You'll be born into it." As I drove home, the sky was clear, the stars sharp and bright against the dark. For the first time, the world didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like home. And somewhere in the quiet hum of the night, I could almost hear my father's laughter, steady, strong, eternal, reminding me that the truth had finally, irrevocably set us free. A full year had passed since the courtroom doors closed behind Vivian, but some nights I still woke up hearing my father's voice. Not the recording, not the courtroom playback, but the way he used to call out from the hallway. "Hey, kiddo, lights out." I'd open my eyes to silence and realize that voice now lived in everything he'd left behind. It was in the hum of the store's lights, the warmth of the foundation's office, the laughter of people rebuilding their lives. It was everywhere love had survived the storm. On the anniversary of his death, Ethan and I stood by his grave again. The grass had grown thick and green, and the headstone gleamed in the late afternoon sun. Sterling Hayes, father builder, believer in love. Someone, maybe one of his old employees, had left a small wrench beside the flowers. It made me laugh quietly. "He'd love that," Ethan said. "Yeah," I murmured. "He'd probably say, at least someone brought something useful." We stood there in comfortable silence. Ethan had changed, no longer the arrogant son molded by his mother's bitterness, but a man learning to make his own choices. "You ever think about her?" he asked after a moment. I exhaled slowly. "Sometimes. Mostly, I think about the parts of her I don't want to become." "She sent another letter," he said softly. "The prison chaplain said she started volunteering, helping inmates learn bookkeeping." I smiled faintly. Maybe that's her way of paying back what she took. We stayed until the sun dipped low, casting gold light across the graves. Before leaving, I placed my father's old fountain pen on the marble. "You were right," I whispered. "Love really does make family, and the truth really does win in the end." Back home, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee as the cicadas hummed in the trees. The air smelled like rain and sawdust, a scent I'd come to associate with peace. My phone buzzed with messages from the foundation team. New applications, thank you notes, photos of families who'd found safety through our grants. I scrolled through them slowly, tears warming my eyes. These people didn't know my father, but they were living proof of his lesson that love builds more than blood ever could. I started recording the next YouTube episode for our Foundations channel. The camera light blinked on red and steady. I took a breath and began. "Hi, everyone. I'm Clara Hayes. If you've been following our story, you know this all began with loss, but it didn't end there. A year ago, I stood at my father's grave while someone tried to erase everything I was. But what I learned that day was something I want to share with all of you. No one can erase truth. Not really. You can bury it, mock it, even fake its absence, but truth has a heartbeat, and it always comes back stronger. I paused, letting the words settle. Some of you wrote that my story gave you courage to stand up for yourselves, to leave, to speak, to rebuild. That means more than you know, because that's what my father wanted, to build tools for people who'd been broken. And sometimes those tools aren't made of metal or wood. They're made of words, of choices, of love. I leaned closer to the camera voice, soft but sure. If you're watching this and you've ever been told you're not enough, not real enough, not worthy enough, not family enough, remember this: you get to decide who you are. Love isn't proven by blood or permission. It's proven by action. By showing up, by standing up, by staying true when it would be easier to disappear. The cicadas outside grew louder. The light on the porch dimmed to gold. My father taught me that every broken thing can be fixed if you care enough to try. That's the legacy he left me, and now it's the one I leave with you. I ended the recording there. Before uploading, I looked at the thumbnail photo, Dad and me in front of the hardware store, both of us laughing, covered in paint and sawdust. Underneath it, I typed the video title, Love Makes Family, the truth that saved my father's legacy. As the video uploaded, I whispered the same words I had whispered at his grave. Thank you, Dad, for everything. The wind moved through the porch screens, soft and steady, almost like a reply. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was closing a chapter. I felt like I was opening one.